Hello, Kindred. Good to see you guys. I hope you're all doing really great. Hey, I want to let you know, summer is definitely here, right? It's like walking into the movie Backdraft and you walk out a door right now. It's insane out there. My allergies are fighting the heat. I'm sniffling. If you hear me sniffling, I'm not crying. I only do that when I watch basketball. But I might at some point sneeze or something. And I don't know if anybody else is suffering that way. But this is the time of year in Colorado, and it's a fantastic time and a crazy hot time right now for sure. I was tightening the thing on the music stand earlier. Something popped and my hand went numb. So if I drop dead, the closest man come up here and just finish this for me, okay? Sound good? Okay. It is Father's Day. I'm excited to talk about Father's Day tonight with you. We are, just like I said, or like Lindsay said, I want to say for our podcast, we're taking just a quick pause for a week in this thing on Romans that we're doing to talk about dads as a church, and I'm super excited for that. The truth is this: Mother's Day in the church is one of the most attended weeks of the entire year. And there's reasons for that. Everybody probably has their own reason. But in general, we characterize it by saying that moms who like to go to church wake up that day and they say, we're all going to church. It's Mother's Day, you're going, and people go, right? Father's Day is a little bit different, and there's a lot of reasons for it. But Father's Day is one of the least attended weeks of the entire year. And there's reasons for it. Sometimes it's because a dad says, I just would rather play golf on Father's Day, and that's okay. I want to do that. For me, maybe I'd want to go watch my baseball team get humiliated by a clearly inferior one. That happened to me this week. But whatever that might look like, there's been lots of reasons, but in my experience over the years, I've had something that makes me really sad, because I've had men tell me time and again something along the lines of, I don't need to hear another sermon that tells me how bad I am at being a man, right? Or being a dad, or whatever that might look like. And it's sad in multiple ways. It's heartbreaking. So I want to rest assured tonight that I'm not planning on talking about Father's Day and fatherhood by beating people up, which also, if you look at me, I can't do that. But I'm not going to beat anybody up tonight. I hate the feeling, and see if this resonates with you, of being alone in your car and driving and having that list run through your head of all the ways that you think other people are doing it better than you, or maybe you're just not doing it right, and you're trying to figure out the missing pieces and how you can do better. And I just don't want to add to that head trash for anybody. So what we're going to mostly focus on tonight is how we can get things right, and a lot of places that we are getting things right as men and as dads. But I do have some other caveats that I want to get out of the way quickly to help us lean into what I think will help all of us, men, women, dads, non-dads, moms, non-moms, leave all of us in a better place than we came in. So here's what I want you to know I'm not doing. I am not setting myself up as a parenting expert tonight. If you know me, you know that I am not one of those. Last night I had my kids at the baseball game, and at one point 2 of them were crying. I'm still not sure what I did, but it was something I said to them. And it reminded me of one of my worst moments. Some of you have heard me share this before, but I was a couple years ago taking my kids to a baseball game. As we walked closer and closer to the gate, my kids were fighting. And they were young, they were fighting about something, dumb, but they were getting at each other, and they started fighting, they were hitting each other, and I was pulling them apart, and I just lost it. You guys don't know what I'm talking about, parents. You all know the moment where you just lose it and you start saying stuff in a tone and in a way that you never meant to, and the words are coming. I was like, guys, we will go home right now. We are leaving, right? They're all crying. Oh, they lose it. And right as the worst moment of it, where they're on the ground weeping and I'm yelling, I look up at the gate agent, this sweet little old lady, and she says, well, hi, Pastor Zach. One of my finest moments in life. I am not an expert parent, but I do think that I have for us tonight some really useful things from the Bible. The truth is this: all of us as dads, or all of us from our own dads, we know this, that dads have a unique ability to affect us, both positively and negatively, and sometimes aren't even aware of it. And so for example, years ago when I was a youth pastor, we did this series called Daddy Issues that was focused on how many people have wounds in their life from their fathers. And the students on the last week, they wrote anonymous letters to their dads. And a couple weeks ago, I actually found them in my files, a big stack of these letters. And the reason I kept them was this: it was very eye-opening for me to read them, because most of the letters really were this sweet mix of kind of these sentiments to their dads and these really difficult hurts. A lot of times, probably things that the dads didn't even know they did. And I think that even those of us with great dads, and I'm lucky to say that I have one, I think that even for each one of us, we can identify places that we had to figure out and things that we had to move through as we got older because of things that our dads said or did. And I know that many people have it much worse than that. And so a day like this where we celebrate dads and talk about fatherhood can be a really tough day for a lot of people, and understandably make people want to head for the door, and I get that too. And there's profound loss involved with that for some of us. right? There's separation and estrangement for other people, but all of the things that make us kind of gird up against that are tragedies that are close to our hearts that we carry around, these stories that affect us greatly. And I get that, and I want you to know that we see that and understand that. But as a dad myself, the things that challenge me is that I make mistakes every single day. And I truly want to understand how to be a better dad, or at least more of what my kids really need. See, all three of my kids, I really know need completely different things than one another. And the truth is, being a dad for me is more fun than anything else. We laugh a lot. My entire life I've spent trying to just make people laugh. If somebody laughs at the worst joke I made, we're best friends forever. I got kicked out of 8th grade for trying to make people laugh every day in school. My kids are my best audience, for sure. My kids are also the funniest people that I get to spend time with. We just have a lot of fun. When my first son Zane was born, he's almost 14, one of my friends was visiting, and he was sitting in the corner of the room as I was trying to figure out what it looked like to be a dad, and he kept giggling. And I was like, I don't think this guy does drugs. But he looked like he was just giggling, and he was acting really strange. And I go, are you okay? And he says, you're somebody's dad. And he just thought that was the funniest thing that he ever saw. And it hit me like a ton of bricks right then. This is going to be hard, right? I've been reading a bunch of books the last month or so about fatherhood and about different advice from people and things like that, wiser people than maybe myself. I read a book by this guy, Michael Lewis. He wrote the book Moneyball, that if you like sports movies, it's one of the best sports movies there is. But he wrote a book called Home Game about his kids. And each one of them is about one of his kids being born, and it's kind of like a journal. At one point he writes this, he says, one rule of fatherhood is that if everyone in the room is laughing and you don't know what they're laughing about, they're laughing at you. Right? So nothing's more humbling than having a bunch of little pint-sized humans continue to put you in your place. I have no doubt that many of you can relate, both parents and non-parents, to that. Guys, fatherhood is challenging. And trying to be a good man in the culture and the crazy world that we live in is also really challenging. In the last decade or so, there's been about 1 million books that came out on the Christian market about manhood. A few of them were even pretty good. And I want to kind of transition us to this conversation that I got to have this week with a couple of my friends that are dads. We're going to do that. We're going to watch that here in a minute by saying this. Many of these kinds of books and things focus on personal preferences of whoever wrote them instead of actual biblical character traits. And so I personally know, and this is a tragedy to me, I know men who have left the church and men who have walked away from their faith altogether because they sat under some kind of teaching that led them to believe that they weren't a man by virtue of not enjoying the same things that the author of that book or the giver of that talk enjoyed. But when we look at the Bible and ask it to teach us to be better fathers, to be better men, we don't see things that our culture might call manly things that are prescribed to us to do. As some of them maybe are inherent and some of them maybe are enjoyed by a lot of people, but these are really just trends in our culture that are marketed to us. What we see in the Bible instead is qualities and characteristics that make us better fathers and better men. And so I want to look at some of those tonight. It's not going to be an exhaustive list because no list could be, but these are things that no matter what it is that your hobbies are, no matter what it is that you enjoy, you can apply to life to be a better father and a better man. So let's get into a few of those and then watch this video together. First one is this. Jesus challenges us to be providers. So Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, he tells his disciples that sometimes you just need to ask God for what we need. And he says this, which of you, if your son asked him for bread, would give him a stone? Or if he asked for a fish, would give him a serpent? He says, so if then you, who are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father who is in heaven give good things to those who ask him? Jesus is using this word good here that's literally translated generous. So essentially he's telling us this, that no matter what background we come from or what kind of earthly father that we have, even one that would give a stone instead of bread. And guys, listen, I know from years of working with teenagers that some people have dads who would give a stone instead of bread. I know that. And so if you have a dad like that, my heart goes out to you, but I want you to listen to what Jesus says. Even if you do have that kind of dad, we have a creator who is generous to us, that doesn't hold back things from us for petty reasons or for power trips, but it would only do that if it was good for us and taught us something about how to be more like him. Jesus tells us this, we can be better fathers and better men when we're peacemakers and mercy givers. When we trace the life of Jesus, we find over and over again, we see Jesus refusing to retaliate in the face of violence and challenges. Jesus holding out mercy to those who find themselves in these precarious positions. Jesus extending hope to others at his own peril. The entire gospel is Jesus trading his life for the lives of all others, for the sins of all others, for all time, past, present, and future. And Jesus doesn't take what's rightfully his, but he gives it away so that we can all have it. And remember back to that same sermon, the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus declares, "Oh, the blessedness of the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God." Right? The father-son connection here is really worth looking at because it's the sons of God, those that he's created, us, taking on this characteristic of their father, becoming more like him in their efforts to make peace and to help people be reconciled. So later, when Peter cuts off the ear of one of the arresting soldiers the night before Jesus was to be killed, Jesus not only heals the soldier, but he tells Peter, "All who draw the sword will die by the sword." Here's what I want you guys to know. Jesus is far from weak or passive, but Jesus instead, he shows us that there's strength in choices to show restraint, and that his use of things like power and emotion are on a level that we can only begin to understand. It's challenging because Jesus is appropriately tempered. This might be the one that challenges me the most as somebody who can easily lose their temper. The book of James, it was written by one of Jesus' brothers, urges the Christian, the Jesus follower, by saying this: everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. For man's anger does not bring about the righteous life that God desires. We also see famously Jesus in the temple, and the point that people always say Jesus was angry. He cleared these vendors out in the temple that were trying to sell poor people cheap animals to sacrifice in the temple. And Jesus, it says, was zealous in his anger at these guys. It's the same word that if you guys were here for our talk about Paul, it said that Paul was zealous in his faith, or one of the disciples was called Simon the Zealot. And zeal, if you remember, really means this: someone that's unrelenting in the pursuit of the religious or political ideals. So that word's applied to Jesus here in the temple, in this place that people say Jesus used anger appropriately. It's really telling us this: Jesus was zealous. He was passionate about defending those who can't defend themselves. I really believe this, as men, and it looks a bunch of different ways. We have a switch that flips when we see people that need to be defended. It's activated in moments of vulnerable people needing help. It can look so many different ways. And some people probably do look like action stars in it. I don't. I wasn't blessed that way. But I think for me, it's more like the dad that protects their kid from a mean teacher or a neighborhood bully, right? Or for me, if I'm in a situation where I see an angry customer yelling at a high school kid that works at the Chili's, and it just doesn't feel right to me, and I step in, all of us have this switch that gets flipped. Jesus demonstrates to us over and over again that he is the same. It says Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, as today, as forever in the book of Hebrews. And I think it sums up who he is really well. There's a challenge of all of this, which is consistency. And I say for me as a parent, consistency is one of the most challenging things there is. But Jesus proves himself over and over again to be dependable. And he gives us a chance to become the exact same as we follow him. I'll get back to dependable here in a minute. But next, Jesus loves dangerously. And I'm pretty sure that might be a Beyonce album title. I'm not 100% sure, but I think it is. But I couldn't come up with a better way to say it. Because Jesus didn't just love the people that were easy to love. He didn't just love the people who gave him gifts or vacations or had something really attractive to offer him, somebody that maybe could physically threaten him. Jesus loved people who were previously seen as unlovable. He followed through in moments where he would see things like the woman who was caught in adultery. And we looked at this a little bit last week, but he tells the crowd, if any one of you is without sin, let him be the first to throw a stone at her. He does this over and over again. To enemy soldiers, traitors to the country, terrorists, adulterers, minorities from socially outcasted groups, I could keep going. And he didn't just drop well wishes or leave a box of food and put it on Instagram. He entered into the mess of people's lives, straight into it. And even when it might have been more than he bargained for or more than he thought was coming. We trace these moments over the last several months extensively in our study on the Gospels and Acts, but there are moments like Zacchaeus and Matthew, the tax collector traders, right? The woman at the well who was not only from a minority group they wouldn't even talk to, but somebody who was seen as not good enough to be around. He did this with a Roman soldier that was somebody that nobody had ever talked to that was occupying Israel. He literally went to the untouchable lepers and healed them. Jesus enters the fray of life. He continued to love people through their changed hearts and changed lives. He continued to love people that walked away from him because the price of following him was way too high and they couldn't do it. Jesus stood by those that made decisions, both good and bad, in a season, hopeful that they'd come around to the best for them eventually. But Jesus always left people better than he found them. Jesus does that because he leads with both vision and grace. So I think leadership's this buzzword, and especially in the church, that's lost a little bit of its luster because it's been kind of co-opted by some alpha types a little bit. Here's the truth I want everybody in this room to hear. You are a leader. Every single one of us, no matter what we think about that word, leads. No matter what you do for a living, no matter what you choose not to do for a living, no matter what station of life you're in, you lead. Somebody's watching you. Somebody follows you. A father is specifically tasked with leading his family. And hopefully in this wonderful partnership, and again, that I'm lucky to have, and I think a lot of you are too, but trying to do it intentionally and gracefully. The book of Proverbs has so many different places that I could grab something from as an example, but I grabbed a really famous one from Proverbs 22:6 that tells us this. Start children off on the way they should go, and even when they are old, they will not turn from it. And although parenting can be difficult, and although being a dad can be difficult, when we're leading with a destination in mind like this, a target to aim at, things tend to go a little bit better. And when it doesn't, Jesus always restored people with grace and pointed them towards that same path again, the right way. That's the way he leads each one of us in our own sin and struggle, and it's a great roadmap for us as fathers. So again, this is because Jesus is dependable. One of my favorite things about Jesus is that he's a perfect reflection of his Father in heaven. He even tells us in the book of John that he can't do anything that he hasn't seen his Father do. He serves this Father that gives good gifts. And like that letter James that we looked at earlier tells us, he says, every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of heavenly lights, who does not change like shifting shadows. I don't know about you guys, but my parenting isn't that consistent. I mean, I wish I could say that it is, but I change a lot. I have new rules. My kids are always like, you said we could do that yesterday. I know, I changed it. I'm not consistent, but I'm hopefully changing for the good at all times. But all of us are kind of making it up as we go along when it comes to parenting. But I'm also lucky because I have a whole bunch of friends who are in the same boat, a whole bunch of friends who are trying to lead their family well, trying to parent well, trying to be good men. I had several of them read this, and they made this talk a lot better for me. But I asked two of them that you're going to see here in just a second to have a conversation with me about being dads from different stations of life and different places, and some of the challenges and some of the rewards. And I got to spend a few minutes with them. This is what it looked like. Watch this with me.
Guys, I'm here with two of my friends on Father's Day to talk about being dads a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and let them introduce themselves.
My name is Bob Bush, and I am a father of 4 children, ages 20 to 29. So I've been at this a little while, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this will be my first Father's Day. I have a 3-month-old son.
Fantastic. I asked these guys to jump on with me today because really specifically, I want to talk about something that I've witnessed Bob do really well. He has 4 incredible kids that I know 3 of them really well and friendly with the 4th. And he's done, with his wife, Val, an incredible job of figuring out situational and seasonal parenting. And Trey is a new dad, has the cutest little 3-month-old baby, Cal, and is also a therapist, right? Is that the right word to use? Yeah.
Yeah.
I hung out with Trey for coffee and got free therapy the other day. It was fantastic. But he also has a lot of wisdom in that because of his background. And also he was raised by a dad that was really intentional. So I guess the question that I have for you guys is, how do you individualize your parenting and make sure that you are really giving your kids what they need and establishing something individual for each one of them?
Great question. Each one of our kids early on let us know that they were different from the others, because what you tried with one wasn't going to work at all with the other. And so we had to learn, what each one needed, how each one responded to different situations, their personality types, all that kind of stuff. And I learned a lot of this from Val, my wife, who is phenomenal at being in touch with our kids and who they are and reminding me, hey, pay attention to this, or, So as they got older, I think the key was for us to be be aware of what they enjoyed, what they liked doing, and support them in it, even though it's different than the other kids and what they were involved in, or even different than me and my own personal preferences and what I would typically enjoy. So I became a fan of Little League Baseball. I became a fan of, theater. I became a fan of cheerleading, all these different things that our kids were involved in. And just for me, it was important for me to be there. And even though I traveled a lot when they were growing up, I learned from my parents, you need to show up, you need to be there and be involved. And I think that helped a lot as they got older. They knew that we appreciated who they were, what they were excited about. And that gave us an audience, when they wanted to talk about things that might be a little bit more difficult, we were able to engage with them like that.
Yeah, that's really good. Trey, you kind of shared with me this week about your dad. Will you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I mean, it's kind of echoing what Bob was sharing. I think one of the things I encourage dads that I'll be working with in my office, and something that my dad did for me, is to try to enter into the world of their kid rather than trying to expect the opposite of having their kid enter into their world. When I was in like first, second grade, I didn't like the sports my dad liked, but I really liked baseball at that time. And rather than just kind of begrudgingly supporting me in that, he decided to figure out how to coach me for 3 or 4 years through elementary school in baseball, even though he didn't know anything about it, just because he knew that was what my world was at that time. And he wanted to enter into that with me. Something I hear from dads a lot that I work with is kind of a little bit of that frustration, or maybe just sadness that their kids aren't as interested in what they're interested in. Or just that exhaustion that, when they get home and their fifth graders asking them to go play with them, and how easy it is to say no to that. And I mean, I don't fully get that yet. Personally, I get a little bit of my 3-month-old crying when I get home, but how hard that is to engage. But if we can engage when our kids are asking us, then when they turn 13 or 14 and they typically stop asking, the hope is that there's still a relationship there, that they want to hang out with you, like that there is enough of this foundation over the last 10 years of their lives that there are some common interests, that you have the ability to enter into their world. And so they want to still spend time with you, rather than having gotten no's for the last 5 years of asking and finally saying, okay, well, I'll figure it out myself with my friends or whatever that is.
Yeah, that's so good. That's challenging, right? Because I feel like for me, a lot of times the quick no feels like it's just one time, but you're right. You stack them up a little bit, and that is hard. I was telling Trey that my oldest wants to play video games all the time, and I just don't like video games, just not at all. And I say no and no and no. And I finally the other day was like, fine, I'll play for a couple minutes. And instead of, because I'm always like, you want to play a baseball video game, but there's real baseball on TV that we could watch or we could go play or whatever. But I was challenged by Trey in that he's interested in that. It's not, I don't think completely sucking his soul dry. And I just go, I need to engage better on things like that. I've been challenged this week to try a little bit harder, which is really good. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I would say I was asked by some friends, a few years ago, why in the world am I watching Pretty Little Liars? Right. Because I had 3 daughters who were watching Pretty Little Liars. So if we could have a conversation about what was going on in the show, I mean, it is not epic television, but it was a way for me to spend some time with them and have conversations, about the silliest things, but it was worthwhile.
I love that. But what's also true is I know that your girls started watching American Idol because you love it. And so it works both ways at that point. And that's a really kind of sweet application of that relationship, I think, Yeah. Yeah. We let our kids sometimes choose the music that we play in the car. That's a helpful thing, even though I didn't realize I would come to appreciate, metal or country or pop or, Beyonce, whatever. So. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I'm a huge Taylor Swift fan. I never saw that one coming. Any other things that you guys would kind of like to leave the men of our church with this week on Father's Day?
What's cool with that too, Bob, and what you're sharing is it allows for conversation and it allows for a deeper relationship, especially when they're older and in their teen years. And I think that what my dad did really well with me is we had a friendship in my teenage years. Now, he was still the authority, and I feared him in many ways still, but we had a friendship too. And so we could talk about sports, or we could talk about things that were going on with my friends. He knew my friends' names. He had met them. He was intentional to meet them. And so I always challenge dads to know your kids' friends' names, try to even know them, know a little bit about them, and ask them questions that aren't about behaviors or grades, but just are about their lives. And work on that when they're 10, so that then when they're 15, it's kind of normal for them to share about their school day, for them to share about what their friends are doing, rather than feeling a kind of a need to hide that, or just being uncomfortable. Like, why are you asking me these questions? What are you trying to find out? Compared to I'm just trying to know you. And I just meant so much to my heart from my dad growing up. And I still hope to be able to do that with Cal as well in a number of years.
That's so good.
Yeah, that's great. That's so good. That's great. Something I would say, Zach, is, I think our kids, what I've found with mine is they're pretty forgiving, and it's going to feel awkward. It's going to feel, you're going to feel silly at times, but you get credit for trying in that respect. They appreciate it, even if you embarrass them when they're teenagers. I think they do appreciate, well, at least my dad, he gave it a shot, and I think we do get credit for that.
I love that. Guys, I'm sure we probably could do this for another hour, but I'm going to keep it short and just thank you so much for your time and for your wisdom and for loving your kids and helping the fathers in our church love theirs better. You guys are great. Thanks so much.
Those guys are great. People who think I talk too fast, I sound like I was in slow motion on that. That's what happens before coffee. So if you ever want slow talk, I can do that. I try to put that into practice this week, some of the stuff that they said. And my youngest he's 9. He had basketball camp this week. And I picked him up yesterday, and we were driving away from Broomfield High School. And my daughter's in the car. She's 12. And I say, tell me about basketball today. He goes, oh, I broke this kid's ankles, right? And my daughter goes, oh my gosh, is he okay? So kids need different things at different times. Trey and Bob talked about a lot of great things. Guys, Trey is a counselor. If you're in the market for a counselor, I believe he's one of the best I've ever met in my life. I went and had coffee with him as a friend the other day, and I just sent him a check for $4,000 afterwards. Like, he's unbelievable. It's going to bounce, Trey. Sorry. So they talked about a couple things that I love a lot, but I want to close our time by talking about this individualized kind of personal relationship with each one of our kids that forms this bond and guides them along the path of life and takes them towards the things that we really want from them as followers of Jesus. One of the most interesting biblical profiles to me has always been King David. David's this complicated man. He's a warrior, right? He takes down this giant Goliath at a young age, and he's a poet. He wrote a lot of what we call the book Psalms. David shows us how to have these close friends as a man that are like brothers, and he fails publicly over and over again in his relationships with women. He's described as a man after God's own heart, and he also thinks that he can lie to get whatever he wants at various moments. He has people killed for what he wants. David's a real person, a very complicated one. And honestly, at most points we see David, and we call him probably a pretty terrible dad. But the reason I chose him, I could have chosen somebody else. You're like, why did you choose him? The reason I chose to talk about him is this. At most points, we really see that God continues to bless him and to restore him and to move through him and his line, his family line, ultimately leading to Jesus. Forgiving their mistakes, forgiving their sins, navigating this kind of soap opera life that David had forged. And he shows us the lengths that God will go to get to any of us to redeem us, to take away all of our mistakes and sins, and to help us really be redeemed as people, as men, as fathers. And it shows us this too, that our kids can still learn from us, and our kids can still become the people that God wants them to be, that he wants to bless and lead through them as well. So when David had navigated his journey and he was at the end of his life, we see this moment in the book called 1 Kings that illustrates this individual relationship that he had with his son Solomon, the new king. Solomon, who also is this kind of tragic figure in the Bible in a lot of ways, He finds himself to be complicated. He's called the wisest man to ever live, and he also repeats some of these same sinful patterns that his dad had. I never really understood what the Bible meant by generational sin until I had kids. As our kids model both the negative and positive behaviors that we exhibit, the things that we say. So often my kids will say something that I correct them on, and Josie will say, that was you talking just then, just through them. Here's the scene for David and Solomon. It says this: when the time drew near for David to die, he gave a charge to Solomon, his son. I'm about to go the way of all the earth. Literally what the Hebrew saying is, I'm about to turn into dust, is what David tells his son. So be strong, act like a man, and observe what the Lord requires. Walk in obedience to him. Keep his decrees and commands, his laws and regulations as written in the law of Moses. Do this so that you may prosper in all that you do and wherever you go, and that the Lord may keep his promise to me. If your descendants watch how they live, and if they walk faithfully before me with all their heart and soul, you will never fail to have a successor on the throne of Israel. And it's kind of ironic, David telling him to keep rules that he didn't keep himself, right? But we see a father that's flawed but continuously forgiven and continuously commissioned by God. And we see a son with the whole world in front of him, the king, right? And they share this moment that reminds us what we've been talking about over and over again. The reason we need the gospel is that none of us can ever keep the rules. The law of God is given to Moses. Nobody can ever perfectly keep them. But we can grab a hold of principles like the ones we looked at tonight that lead us into better places as leaders and as men and as fathers. And David told Solomon to be strong. He told him to pursue the best that he can, to be the best man that he can be. And David is intentional with Solomon, knowing that he's going to, as David has lived a flawed life, he's raised a kid who's probably going to live a flawed life as well. But he also knows this, that God is faithful and God upholds both of them through any decision, good or bad, any season that's revered or regretted, and the same thing is true for us. So dads, I want to tell you this, as we celebrate you today and all weekend long, and all of your flaws, right, and all of your victories, and all of your moments of breakthrough, and in all of those times that you feel defeated that bring you back stronger. As we seek to be providers, peacemakers, and mercy givers, as we seek to be appropriately tempered, to love dangerously, to lead with both vision and grace, and to be dependable, the ways that Jesus showed us, may we all be aware that Jesus is in that fight with us, and it's only through him that we can accomplish anything good. I'm going to ask this. If you're a dad or a grandpa or a care provider or whatever that might look like, and you want to stand for a blessing tonight with me, you don't have to, but I would love for you to stand tonight as I bless the dads in our church and also any man who wants to receive a blessing as well. I just invite you to stand with me as we pray. So, God, I'm so thankful as we talk about your plan for us. God, that doesn't look the same as anybody else's. God, you don't ask us to be a cookie cutter version of some man that the culture has said is the manliest. You ask us instead to take a hold of all of the gifts that you've given us and to apply real ways that Jesus talks and moves in the Bible to make us better, to challenge us to be the kind of dad that our kids need. God, I pray today for those of us in this room who have these hurts that we carry from our own fathers, whether it's somebody that we've lost, somebody who's gone away, or somebody that we never knew. God, I pray for those of us in this room tonight that maybe are that dad. As we're trying to figure out what it looks like to reach back out to our kids and to figure out what it looks like to repair relationships, I just pray for grace and mercy. God, I pray for each one of us to be challenged the way we need to be tonight, that we're never going to be a perfect dad, that we're never going to keep every rule, that we're never going to get it all right, but because of who Jesus is, we can move through life with our families, with our kids, and be the best we can be through Jesus. So thank you for him. We pray this tonight in Jesus' name.